My palm stung. The royal guards froze. Even the swamp seemed to hold its breath. I stood there, horrified, staring at the bright red handprint blooming on the neck of the most dangerous predator on the continent. I had just physically assaulted the Alpha King. "It was a mosquito," I stammered, holding up my hand to show the smeared evidence. "A crimson stinger. I saved your life." King Valdrin slowly touched the spot where I'd hit him. His pupils blew wide, swallowing the gold in his eyes until they were pools of absolute, terrifying obsession. He didn't look angry. He looked delighted. "You missed," he growled, grabbing my wrist and pulling my hand back to his throat. "Do it again." Welcome back to Raven's Library Pack. I am so ready to dive into this next chapter with you. Before we get started, I'm curious, where in the world are you tuning in from right now? And more importantly, do you have a furry reading buddy keeping you company today? Let me know in the comments. Quick reminder, if you want to support the channel, skip the wait, and binge these stories ad-free, hit that join button below to become a member. It keeps the library open and the stories coming. Now get comfortable. Let's get into the story. Chapter 1. The sound of the snare wire snapping tight was the only warning I got. I didn't scream. I didn't shout a warning. I launched myself off the cypress root and tackled the man in the $5,000 Italian suit directly into the waist-deep muck. We hit the water with a force that sent sludge flying into the canopy. My shoulder drove into his sternum, knocking the wind out of him, and his back hit the submerged roots with a sickening thud. I didn't let up. I jammed my forearm against his throat, pinning him into the slime, my other hand reaching down to grab the rusted steel jaws of the bear trap that had snapped shut exactly where his ankle had been a millisecond ago. The trap hissed as the tension released, snapping empty air instead of royal bone. "Don't move," I snarled, my face inches from his. Mud dripped from my nose onto his pristine white collar. Beneath me, the stranger didn't struggle. He didn't panic. He didn't even look at the jagged steel teeth of the trap that would have severed his foot. He looked at me. His eyes were molten gold, framed by lashes that were currently clumped with algae. He lay sprawled in the gray water, ruined silk clinging to a chest that felt like a slab of granite under my arm. A slow, dark smirk spread across his face, revealing teeth that were just a little too sharp for a human. "If you wanted me on my back, Ranger," he rumbled, his voice vibrating against my chest, "you could have just asked." I blinked, the adrenaline stuttering to a halt. Most people I tackle in the swamp are either screaming or praying. This guy was flirting. "You idiot," I hissed, shoving off him and scrambling to my feet. The suction of the mud fought me every step of the way. "You almost lost a foot. This represents a perimeter zone. Didn't you see the markers?" The stranger sat up slowly. The water sloughed off his broad shoulders like oil. He ran a hand through his dark, slicked-back hair, seemingly unbothered that he was currently covered in duckweed and frog spawn. "I saw a rotting post with a skull on it," he said, standing up. He towered over me, the water barely reaching his thighs while it swirled around my waist. "I assumed it was local decor. Charming." "It means keep out," I snapped, wading over to reset the trap mechanism. "And you're trespassing. The tour group meets at the south gate, 2 miles that way. This area is for authorized personnel, and things that eat authorized personnel." I expected him to apologize, or complain about his suit. That suit was a tragedy. Bespoke charcoal gray, now ruined by the tannins of the Blackwater Fen. Instead, he just watched me. His gaze felt physical, heavy, dragging over my wet fatigues and the machete strapped to my thigh. "I'm not a tourist," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "You're dressed like a funeral director who took a wrong turn," I countered, wiping mud off my cheek. "Turn around. Walk back the way you came. Step exactly where I stepped, or the next trap won't miss." I turned my back on him to finish securing the perimeter wire. A fatal mistake. "I don't think I will," he said. The water shifted behind me. Before I could react, a hand, large, hot, and calloused, wrapped around my upper arm. He didn't pull, but the grip was absolute. Iron. I spun around, my instincts flaring. I grabbed his wrist, intending to use a joint lock to force him into a submission hold. It was a move that had dropped shifters twice his size. He didn't budge. It was like trying to bend a steel beam. He held his ground, his arm immobile, and he stepped into my space until the heat radiating off him cut through the chill of the swamp. "I didn't come for the tour, Bernice," he said softly. My blood ran cold. "How do you know my name?" "I know everyone's name," he replied. He looked down at his muddy suit, then back at me, the amusement in his eyes sharpening into something predatory. "I am King Valdrin, and you have exactly 5 seconds to explain why you just assaulted the sovereign ruler of the Continental Packs before I decide whether to execute you or thank you." I froze. King Valdrin, the apex, the one who supposedly tore a rebellion leader in half with his bare hands last winter. I looked at the handprint of mud I'd left on his white shirt. I looked at the bruise already forming on his jaw where my elbow had connected during the tackle. I should have bowed. I should have groveled. Instead, I looked at the expensive leather shoes he was ruining in my swamp. "You're the king?" I asked, skepticism dripping from my tone. "I am." "Then you should know better than to wear Italian leather in a wetland," I said, ripping my arm out of his grip. "If you want to execute me for saving your royal ankle, go ahead, but do it fast, because the mosquitoes are biting and I have work to do." I turned to walk away. "I'm not done with you," his voice boomed, echoing off the trees with a sudden terrifying authority that made the birds go silent. I stopped. I didn't turn around. "The exit is that way, Your Majesty." "I'm not looking for the exit," he said. I could hear the smile in his voice. "I'm looking for a guide, and since you've already had your hands all over me, I've decided you're hired." "I'm busy." "You were busy," he corrected. I heard the distinct click of him unbuckling his ruined belt. "Now you're mine. Get me out of this mud, Ranger, before I decide to make this swamp my personal swimming pool and drown us both." Chapter 2. "Drown us both," I repeated, hacking through a wall of sawgrass with my machete. "Don't tempt me, Your Majesty. I know exactly how deep the silt is in Sector 4. Nobody would find the body for a decade." "Is that a threat against the crown?" Valdron asked. He was walking behind me, effortlessly stepping over the roots I pointed out, despite his earlier claim of ignorance. "It's a geological fact," I muttered. The rest of his entourage had finally caught up to us, 6 royal guards looking utterly miserable in tactical gear that was too heavy for the humidity. They flanked us, weapons drawn, treating every dragonfly like a sniper drone. Valdrin ignored them. He was too busy lecturing me on infrastructure development. "This land is wasted," Valdrin said, gesturing at a breathtaking expanse of cypress trees draped in Spanish moss. "It's a chaotic mess of stagnant water and rot. My engineers could drain this basin in 6 months. We could build a proper stronghold here." I stopped dead in my tracks. The mud sucked at my boots. I turned around, pointing my machete at his chest. The guards flinched. Valdrin didn't blink. "Drain it?" I seethed. "This isn't a parking lot. It's a filtration system for the entire southern continent. You drain this, you flood 3 cities downstream. Do they teach ecology in Alpha School, or just How to Brood 101? Valdrin stepped closer, leaning down until his face was level with mine. The scent of ozone and expensive cologne hit me, overpowering the swamp gas. "They teach us that nature serves the strong, Bernice. And right now, this swamp serves no one but mosquitoes and stubborn rangers." "It doesn't serve you," I snapped. "That's why you hate it. You can't command mud." He opened his mouth to retort, likely something arrogant about his divine right to command dirt. When I saw it, a crimson blur. It spiraled down from the canopy, drawn by the heat radiating off his angry royal skin. A crimson stinger, the size of a golf ball, with a stinger filled with enough neurotoxin to paralyze a shifter in 10 seconds and liquefy the tissue in 20. It landed right on his jugular. Valdrin didn't feel it. He was too busy staring into my eyes, waiting for me to back down. "Bernice," he warned, his voice low and dangerous. "I am commanding you to—" I didn't let him finish. I didn't warn him. There was no time. I planted my feet, twisted my hips for torque, and swung my open palm with every ounce of strength I possessed. Crack! The sound was thunderous. It echoed off the water like a gunshot. My hand connected perfectly with the side of his neck, crushing the insect against his skin and snapping his head to the side with violent force. Silence slammed into the swamp. Absolute, terrified silence. The 6 guards froze, their eyes bulging. I had just physically assaulted the Alpha King. I had just slapped the most dangerous predator on the continent, hard enough to leave a handprint. Valdrin stumbled back a step, stunned. His hand came up to his neck, touching the stinging red mark my fingers had left. He looked at the smear of crushed insect on his fingers. Then he looked at me. His pupils blew wide, swallowing the gold. His chest heaved, a low growl starting deep in his chest that vibrated through the water and into my bones. "You," he started, his voice a ragged snarl. "It was a stinger," I said breathlessly, holding up my hand to show the red smear on my palm. "Defensive action. You're welcome." Valdrin didn't look at my hand. He looked at my face. He took a step toward me, the water churning around his legs. The air around him crackled with sudden, oppressive dominance. He wasn't angry. He looked hungry. "You put your hands on me," he whispered, stepping into my personal space until his chest brushed mine. He grabbed my wrist, the one I'd slapped him with, and held it up between us. "It was a bug," I insisted, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I saved your life." "You shouldn't have stopped," he murmured, rubbing his thumb over my pulse point. "Next time, Ranger, use a fist." Chapter 3. Before I could process the fact that the king of werewolves was apparently turned on by blunt force trauma, a high-pitched vibration filled the air. Buzz. It started as a hum and escalated to a roar in seconds. "Down!" I screamed. Valdrin looked confused for a fraction of a second, but his instincts were sharp. When I lunged for him, he didn't fight me. I tackled him again, slamming my shoulder into his gut and driving us both off the narrow ridge of the path and down the steep, muddy embankment. "Fire!" one of the guards screamed from the ridge above us. Bullets. The idiots were firing bullets at a swarm of insects. "Stop shooting, you morons!" I yelled, but my voice was lost in the chaotic thrum of 1,000 crimson stingers descending on the noise. We tumbled down the slope in a tangle of limbs, mud, and cursing. Valdron was heavy, solid muscle and density, and every time we rolled, he seemed to end up on top of me, then under me, then pinning me against the roots before gravity dragged us further down. We hit the water at the bottom with a splash that soaked us to the bone. We didn't stop. The current in the lower channel was strong. I grabbed the lapel of his ruined suit jacket and kicked hard, dragging him toward the hollow beneath a massive ancient mangrove root system. "Under!" I ordered, shoving his head down. For once, he obeyed. We scrambled into the darkness beneath the roots, the water up to our chins. Above us, the sky darkened as the swarm passed over, angry and buzzing, chasing the noise of the guards' gunfire further east. We waited in the dark for 5 minutes, breathing hard. The air smelled of wet earth and alpha pheromones. "Are they gone?" Valdron asked. His voice was right in my ear, calm and steady. Too steady. "For now," I whispered. "The gunfire drew them away. Your guards are probably diving into the swamp right now if they have any brain cells." "They don't," he noted dryly. I shifted, trying to create some distance between us, but the hollow was cramped. My leg was hooked over his, and his arm was wrapped securely around my waist, anchoring me to the root so the current wouldn't take me. "Let go," I said. "No." I froze. "Excuse me?" "You're shaking," he said. "Shock? Or did the swarm tag you?" Suddenly, he moved. He didn't ask permission. His hands were on me instantly, large, hot, and intrusive. He grabbed my shoulders and spun me to face him in the gloom. "Hold still," he commanded. "I'm fine," I protested, slapping his hands away. "I'm the ranger. I don't get bit." "You slapped me," he said, ignoring my protest and grabbing my chin to tilt my head to the side, inspecting my neck. His thumb brushed the sensitive skin behind my ear. "You hit me harder than any man in my battalions has dared to in a decade." "You had a bug on you," I gritted out, trying to ignore the heat of his body pressing me against the muddy roots. "It was a medical procedure." "It was assault," he corrected, his nose brushing against my jawline as he inhaled my scent. "And it was the most interesting thing that has happened to me in this miserable kingdom." He pulled back, his gold eyes glowing in the shadows. He wasn't checking me for bites anymore. He was looking at me like I was the only dry land in the ocean. "Do it again," he whispered. "What?" "Order me," he said, his voice dropping to a velvet growl. "You are so loud up there. Don't move. Get down. Turn around. Do it again." I stared at him. He was insane. The toxins from the swamp must have hallucinated him. "We need to move," I said, shoving his chest. "This is the dead zone. No radio signal, no GPS, and if we stay here, the water moccasins will come to investigate the heat." "Then lead the way, Ranger," he said, releasing me slowly, letting his hand drag down my arm before letting go. "I'm entirely at your mercy." Chapter 4. I climbed out of the root hollow, dripping wet and furious. Valdrin followed, looking like he'd just emerged from a spa treatment rather than a swamp catastrophe. The mud on his face only made his teeth look whiter when he grinned. "Which way?" he asked. "North," I said, pointing toward a thick wall of fog. "We have to loop back to the substation. It's 3 miles through the silt beds." "Silt beds," Valdron repeated, testing the word. "Sounds delightful." We walked for 20 minutes in silence. The terrain was treacherous, deceptive patches of solid-looking moss that were actually bottomless pits of quicksand-like silt. I navigated it by instinct, stepping on submerged roots and sturdy patches of grass. Valdron, however, seemed to have forgotten how to walk. "Bernice!" he called out. I turned around. He was standing on a log, looking at a patch of black mud 5 feet away. "I can't step there." "Why not?" I asked, exasperated. "It's mud. You're already covered in it." "It looks unstable," he said, giving me a look of feigned helplessness that was insulting to my intelligence. "I require assistance." "You are the Alpha King," I said, wading back toward him. "Jump." "And risk a sprained ankle?" He held out his hand. "Help me down." I stared at his hand. It was broad, scarred, and strong enough to crush stone. He didn't need help. He was baiting me. He wanted me to touch him. And God help me, I was going to do it, because I didn't have time to argue. "You are unbelievable," I muttered, grabbing his hand. He didn't just step down. He launched himself off the log, using my grip as a fulcrum. He landed heavily right in front of me, his chest colliding with mine, forcing me to stumble back. He caught me instantly. His arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me flush against his hard body to steady us. The air left my lungs. "Steady," he murmured, his face inches from mine. "Good catch." "I didn't catch you," I gasped, trying to push him away. "You fell on me." "Details," he dismissed. He didn't let go. His hand splayed across my lower back, his fingers digging into the wet fabric of my shirt. "You're very strong for a human-sized wolf, Bernice. Do you grapple often?" "Only with alligators," I said, finally wrenching myself free. "And they have better manners." "I doubt they appreciate the view as much as I do," he said, his eyes dropping to my chest before flickering back up. I turned around to hide the flush rising on my neck. "Keep moving. If you stop again, I'm leaving you for the leeches." "You wouldn't," he said, his voice sounding entirely too confident. "You're too possessive." "I am professional," I shouted, spinning around to yell at him. Thwack! The sound was subtle, wet, and sharp. A black feathered arrow vibrated in the tree trunk, exactly where Valdron's head had been a second before. Valdron's playful smirk vanished instantly. The air around him shifted from flirty warmth to glacial cold. He didn't look at the arrow. He looked past me, into the fog. "Get down," he said. It wasn't a request this time. "Valdron!" "Quiet," he commanded, moving in front of me, shielding my body with his. Another arrow hissed out of the fog, striking the mud at his feet. These weren't stray shots. Someone was hunting us. "Mercenaries," I whispered, recognizing the fletching. "Wolf hunters." Valdron looked at the arrow, then back at me. The helpless tourist act was gone. In its place was something terrifying. "Good," he said softly. "I was getting bored." "Bored?" I hissed, grabbing the lapel of his ruined jacket and yanking him down behind the massive, rotting trunk of a fallen cypress. "You're about to be dead, you lunatic. Those are jagged-tip arrows. They don't just kill you. They bleed you out so they can track the trail." Valdron didn't look worried. He looked annoyed that I had interrupted his view of the shooters. He crouched beside me in the mud, his knees submerged, looking like a panther deciding which mouse to eat first. "There are 4 of them," Valdron stated calmly, peering over the log. "Judging by the draw weight, they're human mercenaries using compound bows. I could cover the distance in 3 seconds. I'd take 2 arrows, heal in a minute, and rip their throats out before they reloaded. And what if they have silver-laced tips? I countered, pressing my hand flat against his chest to keep him down. His heart was beating slow, steady, powerful thuds against my palm. One scratch and your healing factor is toast. You stay here. He looked down at my hand on his chest. A slow, dark smile curled his lips. Make me, he whispered. I didn't have time for his ego. If you stand up, I will knock you out. I know where the carotid artery is, and I have a very heavy flashlight. I'd like to see you try, he challenged, shifting his weight as if to rise. I didn't hesitate. I shoved him backward, hard. He hit the mud with a splash, and before he could leverage himself up, I straddled his hips, pinning him to the swamp floor. I ripped the silk tie from his collar. God, it probably cost more than my truck, and grabbed his wrists. What are you doing? He asked, his voice suddenly thick. Ensuring compliance, I snapped. I wrapped the silk around his wrists and knotted it tight, binding his hands together. Then I looped the end through his belt buckle. It was a makeshift restraint, flimsy against a wolf of his size, but it made a point. You are a liability, Your Majesty. You don't know the terrain, you're dressed like a target, and you have a death wish. Until we are clear of this sector, you are cargo. Do you understand? Valdron tested the bonds. He could have snapped the silk like a cobweb. I saw the muscles in his forearms flex, the veins popping as he applied a fraction of his strength. Then he stopped. He looked up at me, straddling him in the mud, my hair wild and my face smeared with war paint of dirt and grease. His eyes flashed that molten gold again. Cargo, he repeated, tasting the word. He relaxed back into the muck, surrendering completely. Very well, Ranger. Transport me. Don't speak, I ordered, climbing off him and dragging him up by his bicep. And stay low. If I see the top of your head, I'm shaving it. Yes, ma'am, he murmured. The submissiveness was fake, terrifyingly so. But as long as he moved, I didn't care. We moved through the rotten grove, a section of the fen where the methane gas was thick enough to make your eyes water, in silence. Or rather, I moved in silence. Valdron moved like a ghost. For a man who claimed to be a tourist, he stepped exactly where I stepped. He didn't break a twig. He didn't splash. He shadowed me so closely, I could feel the heat radiating off his chest against my back every time we paused. Stop, I signaled with a raised hand. We crouched behind a screen of hanging moss. 50 yards ahead, a small encampment had been set up on a patch of high ground. I saw the mercenary insignia on a crate. The iron collar. Slavers. They weren't just hunting wolves, they were hunting high-value targets for the underground fighting pits. Slavers, I breathed, disgusted. They must have tracked your convoy. They're sloppy, Valdrin whispered, his breath hot against my ear. He had moved up behind me, his bound hands resting casually against the small of my back. The perimeter guard is asleep, and their fire is too smoky. I could kill the sentry before he woke up. I reached back and swatted his hands. You are tied up for a reason. We're going around. Going around takes 20 minutes, he argued softly, leaning his weight against me. Going through takes 2. And gets a shot, I hissed. I grabbed the front of his shirt and yanked him down lower as the sentry stirred. We are ghosting this. Do exactly what I do. I started to belly crawl through the ferns. It was humiliating work, dragging ourselves through the slime, but it was necessary. Valdron followed, but he was making it difficult. Every few feet he would accidentally brush against my leg, or his knee would bump my hip. At one point he stopped entirely. I looked back. He was just lying there in the fern, staring at me, Move, I mouthed. He shook his head, pointing at his bound wrists with a helpless shrug. I'm stuck on a root. He was lying. I knew he was lying. I crawled back to him, furious. I reached down to untangle the silk tie from a tiny, insignificant twig that he could have broken by breathing on it. You are the worst alpha I have ever met, I whispered furiously, my face inches from his. And you are the bossiest omega I have ever obeyed, he countered. I am not an omega, I snarled. Then why do you smell so sweet when you're angry? I opened my mouth to tell him exactly what he smelled like, wet dog and arrogance, when a twig snapped loudly to our left. A scout. I reacted on instinct. I slammed my hand over Valdrin's mouth and shoved his head into the dirt, flattening my body over his to hide him in the ferns. We froze. The scout walked past us, his boots mere inches from Valdrin's nose. I held my breath, my hand clamped tight over the king's mouth, my body pressing him into the earth. Valdrin went perfectly still. His eyes were wide, locked on mine. He didn't struggle. Then, slowly, deliberately, his tongue darted out. He licked the center of my palm. Chapter 7. I jerked my hand back as if I'd been burned, nearly giving away our position. The scout moved on, disappearing into the fog, but the damage was done. My palm tingled where he had tasted me. I glared at Valdron. He just winked. We scrambled out of the kill zone, moving faster now, putting a mile of swamp between us and the slavers. By the time I deemed it safe to stop, the sun was beginning to set, turning the sky a bruised purple. We collapsed on a dry ridge of limestone. I was exhausted, my muscles burning from the tension. Valdron, however, looked worse. He was leaning against a tree, his breathing heavy and ragged. Sweat, too much sweat, was beading on his forehead, cutting tracks through the dried mud. His skin was flushed a dark, angry red. "Valdron?" I asked, the anger vanishing instantly. I moved to him, crouching down. "Hey, look at me." He didn't answer immediately. His head lolled back against the bark, his eyes squeezed shut. A low tremor was running through his body, shaking the leaves above him. "You're shaking," I said, panic rising. "Did a stinger get you? Did you get nicked by an arrow?" I reached out and placed the back of my hand against his forehead. He was burning. Not just fever warm. He was radiating heat like a furnace. It was unnatural. "Don't," he groaned, flinching away from my touch. "Don't touch me, Bernice." "Shut up," I said, slipping into medic mode. I grabbed his jaw to force him to look at me. "Dilated pupils, excessive perspiration, tremors. You have swamp fever. It's the toxins from the stinger bite. It's finally hitting your system." "It's not the toxins," he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel grinding together. "It is," I insisted, reaching for my canteen. "You're metabolizing the poison too fast. Drink this." I tried to bring the canteen to his lips, but he knocked it away with his bound hands. The water splashed onto the limestone. "I said, don't touch me," he roared. The sound wasn't human. It was pure animal. He curled forward, fighting against the silk restraints I'd put on him, snapping them instantly. The expensive fabric shredded like tissue paper. I scrambled back, reaching for my machete. "Valdrin?" He looked up. His eyes were gone. No whites, no iris, just solid, glowing gold. His canines had extended, glistening in the twilight. He wasn't sick. He was shifting, but not fully. He was stuck in that volatile, violent halfway point. He lunged. He didn't attack me with claws. He grabbed my shoulders, slamming me back against the limestone ridge. The impact knocked the air out of me. He pinned my wrists above my head with one hand, his body caging mine. The heat coming off him was suffocating. "I'm not sick," he growled against my neck, inhaling my scent so deeply his chest shuddered against mine. "I'm in a rut, you stupid woman, and you keep putting your hands on me." Chapter 8. Rut? I choked out, the word feeling heavy and dangerous in the humid air. "We've known each other for 3 hours. That is biologically impossible. You're suffering from neurotoxin delirium." "I know my own biology, Ranger," Valdron growled, his forehead pressing against mine. The heat radiating off him was searing, soaking through my damp clothes. His grip on my wrists tightened, not enough to bruise, but enough to remind me that I was currently pinned to a limestone wall by a creature that could bench press a pickup truck. And right now, my wolf doesn't care about the timeline. He cares that you smell like rain, violence, and my swamp mud. "It's my swamp mud!" I yelled, abandoning diplomacy. I didn't struggle against his grip. That would trigger his chase instinct. Instead, I used leverage. I drove my knee up, aiming for his solar plexus. He caught my leg with his thigh before I could connect, pinning me harder. "Fast," he murmured, sounding impressed. "But not fast enough." "Valdron, listen to me," I snapped, changing tactics. I went rigid, staring him dead in the glowing gold eyes. "We are being hunted by mercenaries who want to sell you to a fighting pit. If you go feral on me now, I will leave you here. I will climb a tree and watch them net you. Do you understand?" He stared at me, his chest heaving. Slowly, the gold in his eyes receded, revealing a sliver of pupil. The animal retreated, leaving the man, breathless, sweaty, and looking at me with an intensity that was almost worse than the growl. "You wouldn't," he whispered, a smirk ghosting his lips. "You're too responsible." "Try me," I threatened. "Now let me go." He released my wrists slowly, letting his hands slide down my arms, savoring the friction. I shoved him back, creating 3 feet of distance between us. "Cool off," I ordered, pointing a shaking finger at him. "Do not look at me. Do not smell me. Do not think about biology." "Difficult," he noted, leaning against the tree and crossing his arms. He looked wrecked, shirt torn, hair wild, chest heaving, but entirely unashamed. "Considering you're the one commanding me." I turned away to check the perimeter, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "I'm checking the ridge. Stay put." I moved toward the drop-off, scanning the tree line below. The fog was rolling in thick. I turned back to tell Valdrin to keep his head down, but the words died in my throat. A shadow detached itself from the gloom behind him. It was massive, a heavyweight shifter in tactical gear, moving with silent, deadly purpose. He raised a serrated combat knife, aiming for the base of Valdrin's skull while the king was busy watching me. "Valdrin, behind you!" I screamed, drawing my machete and lunging forward. I was too far away. I knew I was too far. The knife was already descending. Valdrin didn't turn around. He didn't even look. His arm snapped back with blinding speed, a blur of motion that my eyes could barely track. There was a sickening crunch of bone meeting bone, followed by a wet thud. The mercenary didn't scream. He just dropped. I skidded to a halt, my machete raised. Valdrin was standing exactly where he had been a second ago. The mercenary lay in a heap at his feet, his arm bent at a gruesome angle, unconscious before he hit the ground. Valdrin looked at the body, then at his own hand, then up at me. His face went blank. He slumped his shoulders, putting on a mask of bewildered shock. "Oh," Valdron said, his voice dripping with fake innocence. "I think he tripped." "Tripped?" I shouted, pointing at the unconscious man. "You snapped his radius without looking. You nearly took his head off." Valdrin shrugged, wincing dramatically as he rubbed his shoulder. "Pure luck. I flailed. Panic reaction. I'm quite fragile, you know." He stepped over the body of the 300-pound assassin he had just casually dismantled and looked at me with wide, expectant eyes. "I think I pulled a muscle, Ranger. You might need to carry me." Chapter 9. "I am not carrying you," I hissed, dragging the unconscious mercenary into the brush to hide the body. "And drop the act. I saw that. That wasn't luck. That was Tier 1 combat reflex." "I have no idea what you're talking about," Valdrin said, leaning heavily against a cypress tree. "I'm just a figurehead, a diplomat." "You're a liar," I corrected, wiping my hands on my pants. "And right now, you're a beacon." "A beacon of hope?" he suggested, grinning. "A beacon of pheromones," I snapped. "You're in a rut, your adrenaline spiked, and you smell like expensive cologne and aggressive alpha. The wind is shifting. If the rest of his squad is downwind, they won't need tracking dogs. They'll just follow the scent of desperate king." Valdrin's grin faltered slightly. "Desperate is a strong word. I prefer motivated." "We need to mask your scent," I said, looking around the swamp. My eyes landed on a pool of thick black sludge near the roots of a mangrove. It was sulfurous, heavy, and stuck to everything. Perfect. "Absolutely not," Valdron said, following my gaze. He took a step back. "Bernice, no. That is decomposing plant matter and frog excrement." "It's camouflage," I said, stalking toward him. I scooped up a handful of the muck. It was cold and viscous. "And it's not a request. Hold still." "I refuse," he stated, holding up a hand. "I am the king. I draw the line at—" I didn't let him finish. I slapped the handful of mud directly onto the center of his chest. Splat. He froze, looking down at the black stain spreading across his ruined white shirt. He looked back up at me, his jaw tight. "You missed a spot," I said, reaching down for more. "You are pushing your luck, Ranger," he warned, though he didn't back away. "Arms out," I ordered, moving in close. "If you want to survive my swamp, you wear my swamp." He hesitated, then slowly, grudgingly, raised his arms. I went to work. I slapped mud onto his biceps, his shoulders, and his neck. I worked quickly, my hands moving over his hard muscles, covering the scent of royalty with the scent of decay. It started as a tactical necessity, but the air shifted. I was standing between his legs, my hands sliding over his chest, coating his skin. He was warm, so warm under the cold mud. His breathing hitched as my fingers grazed his collarbone. I looked up. He wasn't looking at the mud. He was watching my face, his eyes half-lidded and dark. "You're enjoying this," I accused, pausing with my hands flat on his pectorals. "I'm tolerating it," he lied, his voice rough. "Is that it? Am I sufficiently disgusting?" "Almost," I whispered. I reached up, my muddy fingers hovering near his face. "Jawline." He didn't pull away. He leaned into my touch. I smeared the black mud along his sharp jaw, over his chin, and down his throat. My thumb brushed his lower lip. He bit my finger. Not hard, just a graze of teeth against my skin, shocking and electric. I snatched my hand back. "Don't bite the staff!" "Then stop looking at me like I'm dinner," he rumbled, grabbing my wrist. His grip was muddy and slippery, but unbreakable. He pulled my hand back to his neck, pressing my palm against his pulse. "Finish it, Bernice. Cover me up. Make me disappear." "We need to go," I managed, my voice trembling. "We do," he agreed, but he didn't let go. He leaned down, his muddy forehead resting against mine. "But first, you missed a spot." He took my hand and guided it lower, toward his abdomen. "Valdrin!" I yelped, trying to pull away. "My belt buckle," he smirked, releasing me. "It's shiny, reflects light. Cover it." I glared at him, my face burning. "I hate you." "Liar," he whispered. "You love having me dirty." Chapter 10. We moved fast after that. The banter died down, replaced by the grim reality of our situation. The sun was gone, the swamp was a labyrinth of shadows and mist, and we were not alone. Every 50 yards I heard them. Snaps of twigs, the low murmur of voices, the squelch of boots. The mercenaries were closing the net. They knew we were in this sector. "They're hurting us," Valdron whispered. We were crouched in a thicket of saw palmettos. He was unrecognizable now, a shadow coated in mud, blending perfectly with the dark. "They're pushing us toward the water," I confirmed, checking the magazine on my sidearm. I had 3 rounds left. "They have boats waiting. If we hit the shoreline, we're done." "Then we don't hit the shoreline," Valdrin said. He shifted, and for the first time, I saw the predator clearly. The playful tourist was gone. The man beside me was vibrating with a restrained violence that made the hair on my arms stand up. We turn and fight. "There are too many," I argued, grabbing his arm. "We need cover. There's a hollow cypress about 20 yards back. If I can get you inside, I can lead them away." He looked at me as if I had suggested he wear a tutu. "Hide in a tree? While you play rabbit?" "Yes," I hissed. "My job is to protect the asset. You are the asset. Get in the damn tree." "No." "Valdrin!" "I am not hiding while you bleed for me," he said, his voice rising. "I am done playing victim, Bernice." "You are not playing victim. You are playing smart." I poked him hard in the chest. "I am the ranger here. I know this terrain. You do what I say." He caught my finger. This time, he didn't let go. He twisted my hand, pulling me into him until our chests collided. "Then give me an order," he snarled. I froze. "What?" "You want to be in charge?" He leaned down, his gold eyes blazing through the mud on his face. "Then take charge. Stop treating me like a package to be delivered and start treating me like what I am." "And what are you?" I challenged, breathless. "A weapon," he said. "Your weapon." A twig snapped. Close. Too close. I looked over his shoulder. Through the mist, I saw the glint of silver. A net launcher. A dozen figures emerged from the fog, forming a semicircle around us. They were big, armored, and they were smiling. "End of the line, Your Majesty," the leader called out, leveling a rifle at us. "Hands where we can see them, and tell the bitch to drop the machete." I stepped in front of Valdrin, raising my blade. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would explode. "Over my dead body." "That can be arranged," the leader laughed. I felt Valdrin shift behind me. He wasn't cowering. He was growing. The air pressure dropped. A low, subsonic vibration rattled my teeth. He was right at the edge, waiting for permission. He wouldn't shift unless I told him to. He wouldn't kill unless I allowed it. He was submitting his monster to my control. The leader racked the slide of his rifle. I looked at the mercenaries. I looked at the mud on my boots. I looked at the king waiting for my command. I took a deep breath. "Valdron," I said, my voice steady and cold as the swamp water. "Yes, Ranger." His voice came from right behind my ear, dark and eager. "Kill them all." Chapter 11. "Kill them all," I said. The words tasted like copper and adrenaline. Valdrin didn't move immediately. He didn't launch himself at the mercenaries or shift into the beast I knew was clawing at his skin. Instead, he inhaled deeply, the sound wet and heavy in the humid air. A shudder rolled through his shoulders, cracking the dried mud I'd plastered over his skin. "As you wish, Ranger," he whispered. The mercenary leader laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound that cut through the fog. "Kill us all? With what? Your boyfriend looks like he's about to pass out from heat stroke, and you're holding a gardening tool." He took a step forward, raising his rifle. "Last chance. Drop the blade, or I put a round in his kneecap. We get paid double for a live king, but half price is better than nothing." Valdrin finally stepped away from me. He moved with a strange, fluid grace, shedding the exhausted tourist persona like a heavy coat. He rolled his neck, the vertebrae popping loud enough to be heard over the drone of the mosquitoes. "You should have taken the half price," Valdrin said. His voice had changed. It wasn't the smooth baritone of the diplomat or the husky whisper of the flirt. It was a deep, resonant vibration that I felt in the soles of my boots. "Fire!" the leader screamed, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure. 3 mercenaries pulled their triggers. The bullets hit. I saw the impacts, puffs of mud and torn fabric on Valdrin's chest. I screamed his name, lunging forward, but he didn't fall. He didn't even stumble. He stood there, looking down at the holes in his shirt where the bullets had flattened against his skin and fallen uselessly into the muck. "Silver-jacketed hollow points," Valdrin noted, sounding bored. "Standard issue. Boring." The mercenaries froze. The leader lowered his rifle, his face draining of color. What are you?" Valdrin looked up. His eyes were twin suns now, burning through the gloom. He smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. It wasn't a human smile. It was a baring of fangs that had no business fitting inside a human mouth. "I am the thing you were paid to catch," Valdrin said, "and I have just been given permission to off-leash." He looked back at me over his shoulder. "Stay there, Bernice. You might get splashed." Then, the world tore open. He didn't just shift, he exploded. The sound of bones rearranging was sickeningly wet, a rapid-fire series of snaps and cracks that happened in the blink of an eye. Clothes shredded instantly, turning into confetti. Where the man had stood, a monster now loomed. He was massive, a midnight wolf. I had seen alphas before, big, burly, aggressive things. But this was ancient. He stood 5 feet at the shoulder, his fur a void of black that seemed to absorb the meager light of the swamp. His claws were the length of my machete, digging deep furrows into the root system. The mercenaries started screaming. They dropped their nets. They fired wildly. The wolf didn't roar. He didn't howl. He simply vanished into the blur of violence. Chapter 12. The slaughter was silent, efficient, and absolute. I stood frozen, my machete hanging uselessly at my side. I had spent the last 4 hours dragging this man through the mud, protecting him, thinking he was soft. I had worried about him twisting an ankle. I had worried about him getting a fever. I watched as the Black Wolf tore through a wall of armed men like they were made of wet paper. He moved faster than biology should allow. He was a shadow with teeth. A mercenary raised a shotgun. The wolf swatted him aside with a paw the size of a dinner plate. The man flew 20 feet and wrapped around a cypress tree with a bone-shattering crunch. Another mercenary tried to run. Valdron didn't chase him. He simply bounded once, cleared the distance in a defy-gravity arc, and landed on the man's back. The snap was audible. It wasn't a fight. It was an extermination. The mud flew, mixing with blood and swamp water. The air filled with the coppery tang of death. I watched, horrified and mesmerized. He was magnificent. Terrifyingly, awe-inspiringly magnificent. Every movement was calculated. He wasn't frantic. He was methodical. He was cleaning my swamp. The leader was the last one left. He had dropped his rifle and was scrambling backward into the silt, blubbering, trying to reload a silver cartridge with shaking hands. "No, no, please, I surrender!" the man shrieked. The wolf stopped. He loomed over the man, his black fur matted with gore, his golden eyes burning with a cold, alien intelligence. He lowered his massive head, a low growl rumbling in his chest that shook the leaves off the trees. The wolf looked back at me. He was waiting. He was actually waiting for me to confirm the kill order on the last one. I stared at the mercenary, a slaver who hunted people for sport. Then I looked at the wolf. I nodded. Once. The wolf turned back. There was a snap, a scream cut short, and then silence. Absolute, ringing silence. The swamp was still. The frogs had stopped croaking. The birds had fled. The only sound was the heavy, panting breath of the beast standing amidst the carnage. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was over. We were safe. "Valdrin?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. "It's done. You can shift back now." The wolf turned slowly. He was huge. Up close, he was even bigger than I had realized. He stepped over the bodies, his paws sinking into the bloody mud. He didn't shift back. He didn't shrink. He locked eyes with me. The intelligence I had seen earlier was clouded. The gold in his eyes was swirling, dark and heavy. The rut. The bloodlust. The violence had triggered the primal brain, and he wasn't coming down. He took a step toward me. Then another. He lowered his head, his ears pinned back, a low rumble starting in his throat. He wasn't looking at me like I was his guide anymore. He was looking at me like I was the only other living thing in his world. And he wanted to catch me. Chapter 13. "Valdrin," I said, keeping my voice level. "That's close enough." He didn't stop. The massive black wolf prowled toward me, closing the distance. 10 feet. 8 feet. The heat coming off him was intense, smelling of iron and musk. His lips pulled back, revealing teeth that could snap my femur like a twig. My instincts screamed at me to run. Every cell in my body wanted to turn and sprint for the trees. But I was a ranger. I knew predators. If I ran, he would chase. And if he chased, he would catch me. And in this state, I wasn't sure if he would kiss me or eat me. I planted my feet. I tightened my grip on the machete, though I knew it would be useless against him. "I said stop!" I barked, projecting my voice the way I did with aggressive gators. The wolf paused. He huffed, shaking his massive head, spraying droplets of blood onto the ferns. He took another step, invading my personal space. His nose bumped my chest, hard enough to knock the wind out of me. He inhaled deeply, snuffling at the front of my shirt, pushing me backward. He was testing me, pushing boundaries. Backing down is not an option, I muttered to myself. I dropped the machete. It landed with a dull thud in the mud. I raised my hand, not to strike him this time, but to point. I channeled every ounce of bossy, administrative rage I had. "Sit!" I shouted, pointing at the ground. The wolf froze. He blinked. The command was sharp, authoritative, and completely unexpected. He looked at my finger, then at my face. He let out a defiant snort, snapping his jaws inches from my pointing hand. "I said sit," I repeated, stepping into him. I grabbed the scruff of his neck, thick fur and loose skin, and yanked downward. "Bad dog! You do not approach me like that. Sit down right now." He growled, a sound that vibrated through my hand. But the conditioning of the last 4 hours, the constant orders, the guidance, the submission, kicked in. Slowly, fighting it every inch of the way, the massive hindquarters lowered. He sat. He sat in the mud, looming over me, looking absolutely furious about it. His tail twitched aggressively. "Good boy," I breathed, my knees shaking so hard I thought I might collapse. "Now stay." I reached out and placed my hand on his snout. He flinched, his eyes tracking my movement, but he didn't bite. I ran my hand up the bridge of his nose to between his ears, scratching firmly. "You're a mess," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Look at you." The contact seemed to ground him. The gold in his eyes cleared, the pupils returning. He leaned into my hand, a heavy, exhausted sigh escaping him. Then, the bones shifted. It was less violent this time. The fur receded, the snout shortened, and the massive bulk condensed. In seconds, the wolf was gone. Valdron knelt in the mud before me. He was stark naked, covered in blood and grime, his chest heaving. He looked up at me, hair plastered to his forehead, a feral grin cutting through the exhaustion. "You realized," he rasped, "that you just commanded the king of the continent to sit like a poodle." I pulled off my heavy ranger jacket and threw it at him. It hit him in the face. "Cover yourself," I said, turning around to hide the fact that I was blushing furiously. "You're indecent." "I'm impressive," he corrected, pulling the jacket over his shoulders. "Admit it, Bernice. You liked the wolf." "I liked the silence," I retorted. "Can you walk, or do I have to drag you again?" "I can walk," he said. I heard him stand up. "But I wouldn't mind if you held my leash." Before I could respond, a bright spotlight cut through the fog, blinding us. The roar of a hover engine drowned out the swamp. "Secure the perimeter!" a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. "Target acquired!" I shielded my eyes. A Royal Military dropship was hovering above the tree line. Ropes dropped, and soldiers in pristine armor began rappelling down. Valdron sighed, stepping up beside me and draping a heavy arm over my shoulders.
company," he muttered, just when things were getting interesting.
"Your rescue party?" I asked.
"My headache,"
he corrected. He looked down at me, his eyes serious. "Bernice, whatever happens next, let me do the talking. You just slapped a king. By law, they should shoot you on sight. Let them try," I said, crossing my arms. Valdrin laughed.
"That's my girl."
The first soldier landed, raised his weapon, and pointed it straight at my chest.
"Step away from the king," the soldier screamed. "Step away and get on your knees."
Valdrin's arm tightened around me. He didn't step away. He pulled me closer.
"Correction,"
Valdrin roared at his own army.
"Kneel before your queen."
I choked. "My what?" "My what?" I choked out, the word feeling like a jagged stone in my throat. The soldier in front of me hesitated. His finger was still on the trigger of his assault rifle, and his eyes darted nervously between the mud-caked, half-naked man wearing a ranger's jacket 2 sizes too small and me. "Queen," Valdron repeated, his voice booming with that terrifying alpha resonance that made the fillings in my teeth vibrate. He looked at the squad of 12 heavily armed royal guards as if they were unruly puppies.
"Lower your weapons. If you aim at her, you aim at me."
"Sir," the lead soldier stammered, his discipline cracking under the sheer weight of Valdrin's aura. "Protocol states that any unauthorized contact with the monarch during a code red is a hostile act. She's holding a machete." "I dropped the machete," I yelled, pointing at the mud. "And I am not unauthorized contact. I am a federal employee. I have a badge under this sludge." Valdrin didn't look at me. He stepped forward, placing himself directly in the line of fire. He looked ridiculous. My jacket was straining across his broad shoulders, ending midway down his torso. But no one was laughing. He radiated lethal intent. "She is not a federal employee," Valdrin corrected, his tone dropping to a deadly calm. "She is the only reason I am not currently being dissected by slavers. Now, Lieutenant, unless you want to be reassigned to Penguin Patrol in the Antarctic Circle, you will lower that rifle." The lieutenant lowered the rifle. The rest of the squad followed suit instantly.
"Secure the perimeter,"
the lieutenant barked, pivoting to save face.
"Medics, get the king a blanket. Get an extraction team on the prisoner."
"She is not a prisoner," Valdrin roared. "I am not a queen," I shouted simultaneously. We glared at each other. Valdrin looked like he wanted to bite me, and for the first time in the last 4 hours, I wasn't sure if it was out of anger or that weird, twisted amusement he kept showing. "Bernice," he warned, stepping into my space until I had to crane my neck to look at him.
"Do not argue with me in front of the help."
"The help?" I hissed, poking him in the bare chest exposed by the open zipper of my jacket.
"That is the Royal Army, and stop calling me that. You can't just declare monarchy titles because you're high on adrenaline and swamp fumes."
He caught my finger. His hand was warm, heavy, and covered in dried blood. He didn't let go. He squeezed, just enough to trap me. "I can declare whatever I want," he murmured, leaning down so only I could hear.
"I am the king, and right now, you are the only thing keeping me from tearing this entire dropship apart. So for the love of the moon,
just accept the promotion and get on the damn boat." "I am not getting on the boat," I said, digging my heels in. "I live here. My truck is parked at the trailhead." "Your truck is likely being stripped for parts by the mercenaries' backup team," Valdrin said, pulling me toward the hovering dropship. "You're coming with me." "Is that an order?" I challenged, resisting his pull. Valdrin stopped. He looked at the soldiers watching us with wide eyes. He looked at the waiting dropship. Then he looked at me, a wicked glint returning to his eyes. "No," he said softly. "It's a hostage situation. I'm not leaving without you. So unless you want the king to camp out in your mosquito-infested swamp indefinitely, get on the boat." Chapter 15. The ride to the forward command base was tense, mostly because Valdrin refused to let go of my hand. He sat on the bench of the dropship, a thermal blanket draped over his shoulders, looking like a devastatingly handsome statue of Mars, while a medic tried to clean the wound on his arm. I sat next to him, muddy, smelling like death, and acutely aware that every soldier on board was staring at our joined hands. When we landed, the chaos started all over again. The ramp lowered, and we were met by a wall of noise, officers shouting, engines revving, and a man in a general's uniform storming toward us. General Cormac. I recognized him from the news. He was old school, stiff, traditional, and known for hating anything that wasn't paved. "Your Majesty!" Cormac shouted, rushing up the ramp before we even disembarked. "We lost your signal for 6 hours. We feared the worst." He stopped when he saw me. His nose wrinkled. I probably looked like a swamp monster, hair matted, face painted with black mud, clothes torn. "Security!" Cormac barked, gesturing at me. "Get this civilian away from the king. Get her to decontamination and then holding. We need to debrief her on how she allowed the monarch to be endangered." 2 MPs stepped forward to grab me. "Don't," Valdron said. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. The word cracked like a whip. The MPs froze mid-step. Valdron stood up, discarding the thermal blanket. He was still wearing my tiny ranger jacket. It should have been funny. It wasn't. "General," Valdron said, his voice ice-cold, "you seem confused. This civilian didn't endanger me. She extracted me from a kill zone, while your highly paid security detail was busy shooting at bugs." Cormac flustered, his face turning red. "Sir, Protocol dictates that you secure the asset," Valdron cut him off. He reached out and pulled me against his side. I stiffened, but I didn't pull away, mostly because I was too busy enjoying the look on the general's face. "She is the asset. Without her, I would be dead, or worse, sold. She is a ranger," Cormac sputtered, looking at me with undisguised contempt. "She is a glorified gardener." Valdrin looked down at me. He saw the mud, the exhaustion, and the defiance in my eyes. He smiled, a genuine, sharp smile. "She is in charge," Valdrin announced, loud enough for the entire hangar to hear. The silence was deafening. "Sir?" Cormac whispered. "The swamp," Valdrin clarified, waving a hand vaguely at the wilderness behind us. "The cleanup operation, the mercenary interrogation, all of it." "Nothing happens in this territory without her approval. If she says you can't park your tanks there, you move the tanks. If she says you leave, you leave." I blinked. "Wait, what?" "You heard me," Valdrin said, looking at Cormac. "Do not speak to me about the logistics. Speak to the ranger. She knows the terrain. You don't." Cormac looked like he was going to have a stroke. "But, Your Majesty, she is... Look at her!" Valdrin turned to me. He reached up and wiped a smudge of mud from my cheek with his thumb. "I am looking," he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous, intimate growl. "And I don't see a gardener. I see the woman who put a king on his knees." He turned back to the general. "Get her a tent, get her a hot shower, and get her whatever food she wants. If anyone disrespects her, Cormac, I will strip them of rank and leave them in the silt beds for her to find. Chapter 16. An hour later, I was clean. Mostly. I had scrubbed the swamp off my skin in a portable military shower that had better water pressure than my house. I was wearing a spare flight suit that was too big for me, rolled up at the ankles and sleeves. I felt human again. I didn't feel safe. I was summoned to the command tent. It was a massive structure, buzzing with technology and officers. In the center sat Valdron. He was transformed. Gone was the muddy, feral creature I had dragged through the mire. He was shaved, showered, and wearing a fresh charcoal suit that fit him like a second skin. He sat behind a desk, reading a digital tablet, looking every inch the corporate monster that ruled the continent. When I walked in, he dismissed the room. "Leave us," he said without looking up. General Cormac and his staff hesitated, then filed out, casting glares at me. The flap closed, leaving us alone. Valdrin finally looked up, his eyes locked on mine. The air in the tent instantly grew heavy. "You clean up well, Ranger," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I want to go home," I said, crossing my arms. "I guided you out. I helped you kill the bad guys. My job is done. I want to go check on my cabin." "Your cabin is fine," Valdron said, tapping the tablet. "I have a drone perimeter around it. No one gets in." "I don't want a drone perimeter," I snapped. "I want my life back. You said I was in charge, so here's my first order. Get your army out of my swamp." Valdron stood up. He walked around the desk, moving with that predatory grace that reminded me too much of the wolf. He leaned against the edge of the desk, crossing his ankles. "I can't do that," he said. "Why not?" "Because we need to negotiate the terms of the annexation," he said smoothly. "There is no annexation!" I shouted, throwing my hands up. "You saw the swamp? It's hostile. It tried to eat you. Why would you want it?" "I don't," he admitted. I froze. "What?" "I don't want the land," Valdrin said, inspecting his fingernails. "You were right. It's a wet, miserable hellhole. Draining it would be a logistical nightmare, and frankly, I hate the smell." "Then leave," I said, exasperated. "Pack up and go back to your glass tower." "I intend to," he said. He looked up, and his gaze pinned me to the floor. "But I'm taking the best part of the swamp with me." My stomach dropped. "Valdrin." "I want the warden," he said simply. "I am not for sale," I said, stepping back, "and I am not a souvenir." "No," he agreed, pushing off the desk and walking toward me. "You are a necessity. You're the only person who has looked me in the eye and said no in 5 years. You're the only one who has hit me. You're the only one who has commanded me." He stopped a foot away. "I am designating the Blackwater Fen a royal sanctuary," he said. "It will be protected. No development, no drainage, just nature." "That's good," I stammered, caught off guard. "But," he continued, a smirk playing on his lips, "a royal sanctuary requires a royal warden. One who reports directly to the king, in the capital." "No," I said instantly. "I'm not moving to the city. I'm a ranger. I belong here." "Then we have an impasse," Valdrin murmured. "I can't leave you here, Bernice. I've tasted your authority. I'm not going back to a diet of sycophants." He walked past me to the tent entrance and zipped it shut. He locked the latch. "What are you doing?" I asked, backing up until my legs hit the desk.
"Negotiating," he said, turning around.
He began to unbutton his suit jacket.
"You want your swamp? You want me to leave it alone and let you stay?"
"Yes." He tossed his jacket onto the floor. He loosened his tie. His eyes flashed gold.
"Then earn it," he said. "1 round. No weapons. If you can pin me to this floor for 10 seconds, you get everything you want. I leave the swamp, I leave you, and you never see me again."
"And if you pin me?" I asked, my breath catching. Valdron smiled, and it was the wolf's smile.
"Then you come to the capital," he said, "and you wear my ring."
Chapter 17. Wear your ring? I repeated, the words tasting like metal and absurdity.
"I'd rather wear a leech. At least the leech falls off when it's full."
Valdron tossed his tie onto the desk, his movements fluid and unhurried. He undid the top button of his shirt, revealing the hollow of his throat, the exact spot where I had slapped him hours ago. The skin was still slightly pink.
"Leeches are parasites, Bernice," he said, rolling up his sleeves to expose thick forearms corded with muscle. "I'm a predator. Once I attach, I don't fall off. I dig in."
He took a step toward me. The tent felt suddenly microscopic.
10 seconds, he reminded me, his voice dropping to that vibration that rattled my molars. "Clock starts when one of us hits the mat."
"You're on," I snapped. I didn't wait for him to get ready. I didn't bow. I launched myself at him. I went low, aiming for a double-leg takedown. It was a move that worked on poachers twice my size. I hit his waist with my shoulder, driving my legs into the floor to generate torque. It was like hitting a redwood tree. He didn't budge. He didn't even stumble. Instead, he looked down at me, his hands hovering over my back, not touching me yet.
"Is that it?"
he asked, sounding genuinely disappointed.
"I thought you were a ranger, not a linebacker."
"Shut up," I grunted, hooking my leg behind his knee and stomping on his instep with my heavy boot. That got a reaction. He hissed, his knee buckling slightly. I used the momentum, shoving his chest with everything I had. He stumbled back, hitting the edge of the heavy oak desk. The lamp wobbled.
"Better,"
he growled. He moved, fast. He grabbed my waist, his hands large and hot, and lifted me off the ground as if I weighed nothing. The world spun. He didn't throw me. He slammed me down onto the thick tactical rug in the center of the tent. It knocked the wind out of me. Before I could inhale, he was on me. He straddled my hips, his weight pressing me into the woven wool. He pinned my wrists above my head with one hand, his fingers locking around mine like manacles.
1,
he counted, his face inches from mine. "Get off!" I yelled, bucking my hips. 2, he continued, smiling.
"You're squirming, Bernice. It's distracting."
"I am fighting for my freedom!" I shouted. I managed to free my right leg and hooked it around his neck, squeezing tight. It was a desperation move, a triangle choke. Valdrin didn't panic. He leaned into it. He let me squeeze, his eyes darkening as the pressure cut off his air. He wasn't fighting the choke. He was testing my strength. 3, he wheezed, grinning. 4. "Stop counting!" I snarled. I released the choke and jabbed my thumb into the pressure point under his rib cage. He roared, half pain, half laugh, and rolled. The world flipped. Now I was on top. I scrambled to pin his shoulders, shoving his chest down. "Reset!" I gasped, hair wild, face flushed. "That was a reset!" "Agreed," he said from beneath me. He lay there, his shirt torn open, looking entirely too comfortable with me straddling his chest. "Your turn." I grabbed his wrists and tried to pin them. It was impossible. His arms were steel. He let me push them down, feigning weakness, until his knuckles brushed the rug. "1," I started. "Too slow," he whispered. He bucked his hips. The force launched me forward. I slid up his body, my face burying in his neck. He wrapped his arms around me, rolling us again until we hit the leg of the desk with a thud. We were a tangle of limbs and heavy breathing. It wasn't a fight anymore. It was a brawl. I bit his shoulder. He growled and nipped at my ear. I kneed him in the thigh. He grabbed my calf and dragged me back when I tried to crawl away. "Give up," he panted, pinning me face down this time, his heavy body covering mine like a weighted blanket. He leaned down, his lips brushing the shell of my ear. "Say it. Say you're mine." "Never," I spat into the rug. I waited. I waited for him to relax, thinking he had won. I felt his muscles loosen slightly as he shifted his weight to get comfortable. Now, I exploded into motion. I didn't try to overpower him. I used his own weight. I dropped my shoulder, rolled hard to the left, and when he compensated, I spun back to the right. He slipped. I shoved him off, scrambling on top of him before he could recover. I slammed my hands onto his shoulders, pinning him flat on his back. I locked my elbows. I hooked my legs around his waist to anchor myself. "One!" I screamed. Valdron looked up at me. His chest was heaving. His hair was a mess. There was a scratch on his cheek from my zipper. He blinked. He tested my hold. He could have thrown me. I knew he could have thrown me. But he looked at my face, fierce, sweaty, and determined. And he stopped. 2, I counted, glaring at him. "Don't you dare move." 3, he helped me count, his voice rough. He reached up. I flinched, expecting a counter move. But he just tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His hand lingered on my cheek, his thumb tracing my lower lip. 4, he whispered. 5. "Stop helping me," I said, my voice shaking. "Fight back." "I am," he said softly. "I'm fighting the urge to let you win just to keep you on top of me." 6, I said, ignoring the flutter in my stomach. 7. He stared at me. The gold in his eyes was molten, swirling with a mix of pride and something deeper, something that scared me more than his wolf form. 8, he murmured. "You're beautiful when you're winning, Bernice." 9, I choked out. 10. I slumped, the adrenaline crashing. I stayed on top of him, breathing hard, my hand still pinning his shoulders. "I win," I whispered. "I win. You leave." Valdrin didn't push me off. He lay there, staring up at the canvas ceiling of the tent for a long moment. Then he looked back at me. "You won the match," he agreed. "So you go," I said, trying to summon the joy of victory. It felt hollow. "I go," he nodded. "A deal is a deal. The army pulls out at dawn. The sanctuary papers will be on your desk by noon." He reached up and grabbed my hips, lifting me off him and setting me gently on the rug beside him. He sat up, buttoning his torn shirt with agonizing slowness. "But Bernice," he said, standing up and grabbing his jacket. I stayed on the floor, looking up at him. "What?" He walked to the tent flap and unlocked it. He turned back, his silhouette framed by the light of the camp outside. "You pinned my body," he said, his voice quiet and deadly serious. "But you didn't pin the king. I'm leaving the swamp. But don't think for a second that I'm leaving you." "I won," I reminded him, hugging my knees. "For now," he said. "Check your pocket." He walked out. I frowned, reaching into the pocket of the flight suit I was wearing. My fingers brushed something cold and hard. I pulled it out. It was his tie clip, pure gold, shaped like a wolf's head, and wrapped around it was a handwritten note on royal stationery that he must have slipped in while we were rolling on the floor. I unfolded it. It had 3 words: "See you soon." 3 months later, and I still hadn't figured out how to walk in heels. The royal council chamber smelled like lemon polish, old paper, and fear. It was a stark contrast to the peat and rot of the Blackwater Fen, and frankly, I preferred the rot. At least the rot didn't try to legislate me into a coma. I shifted in my seat, the velvet cushion doing nothing to comfort my stiff back. I was wearing the official dress uniform of the Royal Warden of the Blackwater Sanctuary, a ridiculous navy blue thing with gold braiding that made me look like a high-ranking bellhop. And regarding the allocation of funds for the northern infrastructure, General Cormac droned on, clicking through a holographic projection of a budget spreadsheet that was redder than a fresh kill. "We are seeing a deficit due to the unexpected reallocation of resources to the southern wetlands." Cormac shot a glare at me. I didn't blink. I just crossed my legs, hoping the heel of my shoe wouldn't snap off, and stared him down. "The southern wetlands are a protected heritage site, General." A deep, bored voice rumbled from the head of the table. "The funds are non-negotiable." King Valdrin sat on the obsidian throne, looking like a god of war forced to do taxes. He was wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than the entire infrastructure budget Cormac was whining about. His hair was slicked back, his jaw was shaved, and his eyes were cold, hard gold. He hadn't looked at me once since the meeting started. Technically, I was only here because the Royal Sanctuary contract, which I had signed without reading the fine print, required the warden to deliver a monthly status report in person to the Crown. It was a trap. A bureaucratic, loophole-filled trap designed to force me into his orbit once every 30 days. "But surely, Your Majesty," Cormac pressed, sweating slightly. "The drainage project alone would save millions." "I said no," Valdron cut him off. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "The subject is closed. Move on." The room fell into a terrified silence. The 24 council members held their breath, terrified of the Alpha's temper. Valdrin tapped his pen against the desk, his gaze fixed on a spot on the far wall, looking utterly done with humanity. Then I heard it. Bzzz. It was faint at first, a low, irritating hum, a common housefly, the city's version of a mosquito, just dirtier and with less ambition. It circled the long mahogany table, dodging Cormac's flailing hand, and zipped toward the head of the room. It was drawn to the heat, drawn to the predator. It landed directly on Valdrin's neck, right over the jugular. The entire council froze. They watched the insect crawl on the king's skin. They knew Valdrin. They knew his patience was already hanging by a thread. Cormac looked like he was about to faint. Valdrin didn't move. He didn't swat it. He didn't even twitch. Slowly, deliberately, he turned his head. He looked down the length of the table, past the generals, past the dukes, past the trembling scribes. He locked eyes with me. His face was impassive, but his eyes were dancing. The gold swirled with a dark, suppressed humor. He raised an eyebrow, just a fraction of an inch. "I dare you," his eyes said. My heart skipped a beat. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with that familiar electric tension that had kept me awake for the last 90 nights. I sighed loudly. The sound echoed in the silent room. Cormac whipped his head around to look at me, horror dawning on his face. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the marble floor. "Warden?" Cormac squeaked. "Sit down. You are out of order." I ignored him. I walked down the length of the table, my heels clicking a sharp military rhythm. Click, click, click. The royal guards at the door tensed, their hands drifting to their weapons. Valdron shot them a single look, and they froze, returning to statue mode. I reached the throne. Valdron looked up at me, the fly still crawling on his neck. He didn't flinch. He didn't speak. He just waited, his hands resting calmly on the armrests, looking up at me with absolute submission and absolute control. I leaned in close. The scent of him, ozone, musk, and expensive cologne, filled my lungs, making my head spin. "Hold still," I whispered. I drew my hand back. Cormac gasped. "Treason!" Smack! The sound was sharp, wet, and incredibly satisfying. I slapped the side of his neck with enough force to sting my own palm. The council erupted. Chairs flew back. Someone screamed for security. Cormac looked like he was having a cardiac event. Valdrin didn't recoil. He didn't get angry. He caught my wrist before I could pull away. He slowly reached up with his free hand and rubbed the red mark blooming on his skin. He looked at the spot, then looked back at me, his eyes burning with a hunger that made my knees weak. "You missed," he rumbled, his voice dark enough to drown out the chaos of the room. "I never miss," I said, breathless. "I got the bug." "But you forgot the payment," he whispered. He yanked my arm, hard. I stumbled forward, losing my balance on the ridiculous heels, and fell directly into his lap. His arms wrapped around me instantly, locking me against his chest, hard and immovable. Before the council could process the fact that the warden was sitting on the king, Valdrin captured my mouth. It wasn't a polite kiss. It was a claim. It was 3 months of distance evaporating in a second. It was teeth and heat, and the taste of the swamp and the palace colliding. He broke the kiss, but didn't let me go. He turned his head to the horrified, silent room, keeping one arm clamped firmly around my waist. "Meeting adjourned," Valdrin announced, his voice rough. "The warden and I have urgent ecological matters to discuss." "But," Cormac stammered. Valdrin growled, a low warning sound that made the windows vibrate. "Out," he commanded. The room cleared in record time. As the heavy doors slammed shut, leaving us alone in the sudden quiet, Valdrin looked back at me, touching the red mark on his neck again. "You hit hard," he noted, sounding incredibly pleased about it. "You shouldn't have tempted me," I said, resting my forehead against his. "I plan to tempt you every day until you move into the East Wing," he said, his hand sliding up my back to tangle in my hair. "Did you bring your machete?" "No," I smiled, grabbing his tie. "I brought my hands." "Good," Valdrin said, pulling me down again, "because I have a lot of tension in my neck." Quick favor, don't go anywhere yet. If you thought Valdrin was obsessive, You have to see this next alpha. The heroine literally reverses into his Ferrari, and instead of asking for insurance, he decides to claim her soul as payment. It is absolutely unhinged. Click the video on your screen right now. Watch out. You do not want to miss this crash.